So welcome everyone to our Drummond G10 FHIR API Plus powered by Touchstone webinar. Today's webinar, we were going to go over the announcement from ONC regarding the alternate test method, as well as provide our AEGIS customer base with the up-to-date information as it relates to compliance and certification for what everyone is referring to as well-known G10. I'm your host, John Belukovich. I'm Director of Program Management here at Drummond, and I'll be giving some of the information in the presentation as it relates to the compliance piece. I'm pleased to have alongside with me Tim Bennett, who most of you know. He's our Director of Strategic Health Initiatives. And we also have James Threet, our Director of our Test Lab, will also be here to provide a demonstration of the alternate test method. Just a couple of housekeeping items, team, is we're going to leverage the Q&A function built into the webinar, not the chat. The Q&A allows us to save off all of the questions and responses, as well as gather any questions that might require some additional follow-up. So again, please disregard the chat function, and if you do have a question, enter it into the Q&A. Some of these we will leverage a response to in the Q&A, perhaps during the webinar, and we will scour them at the conclusion of the webinar to provide some live follow-up. We envision this webinar lasting about 35 to 40 minutes, so that should allow us some time for questions at the end and for all of our attendees to transition to other responsibilities and meetings that you might have at the top of the next hour. Also, too, is this webinar is being recorded. We'll make that available, as well as the deck content. You'll find that on the usual pathways through the customer portal and the website. So again, all of this material will be made available to our attendees and our AEGIS customer base. So our accomplishment today will be reviewing the regulatory deadline as it relates to G10, how that ties into the specific timeline between now and the end of the year and what that means, lining up an approach for how Drummond is positioned to help our AEGIS customer base achieve compliance to G10. I'll then pass it over to Tim Bennett, who will go through the newly approved alternate test method. Concurrent with that, James will show you a little bit into the UI, talk a little bit about the AEGIS partnership, and then we will wrap up the webinar with a description of the varying pathways that you, our AEGIS customers, can take on your way to achieving compliance with the G10 requirements. Okay, so let's get into it at the very top. It's important to note the regulatory deadline, and important to notice what that really encompasses. So as from the language here, this is ONC's key language, the idea is that there's the requirement that the API for maintenance of your certification, health IT developers, you're replacing your G8 criteria with technology that is upgraded and certified to the G10 criteria by December 31st of 22. What's important to note, it's not only is the software gone through and been certified and it's compliant, is the key to having to provide your customer base with access to this platform. So the details are certification by the end of the year is required. Availability to customers is also required. And ONC is really going to take a hard look at this. They've made it very clear in the roundtables that ACBs such as Drummond have with ONC is that they are serious about initiating direct review processes beginning next year. They do have the capability and power to terminate your certification or issue a certification ban if you're not compliant with G10, a la a customer is not able to get access to the platform, even if it was certified. It's also key that you understand from a development perspective that if you do withdraw your G8, don't certify to G10 and then come back in 2023, it certainly is allowed, but ONC has the right to scrutinize it a little bit more closely to make sure there wasn't any efforts to buy time. And that's important. And again, I think most of our AEGIS customers are good actors, but it's important to note that ONC is very serious about ensuring these capabilities are available in the field. So let's work forward and say December 31st. What does that mean for me in terms of planning as an EHR developer and getting ready for certification and completing all of that in time? It's been made clear to our customer base here that the final drop dead deadline for becoming certified through the compliance certification process is December 16th. We do need a couple of weeks for anybody that comes screaming in at the end to ensure that the paperwork is over to ONC and Chapel is updated by December 31st. Reminder, there is a 10% discount to your certification fees if you are able to be enrolled by the end of Q3 for your G10 testing. To date, as of yesterday, Chapel lists 34 health IT products that are certified to G10. We're fortunate that 30 of those 34 are Drummond developed customers. But what that does leave room for is there are many more that have yet to certify. So it's imperative that the deadline is approaching and you understand and frankly make haste to ensure that you schedule your compliance and certification efforts, as well as your efforts to prepare your platform to be made available to your customers. All the while, I think it's important to note as your guide getting you through ONC certification and compliance activities that this October, there's another round of the biannual ONC attestations that's due. Underneath the technical hood, in addition to developing APIs, you're incorporating US CDI. Also, as you well know, this is real world testing year one. You're in the field, you're getting your test results and all of that data to prepare for the real world test results report that's due at the beginning of Q1 of 2023. And it also begins real world testing year two. Another real world test plan is due by December of this year as well. So there's a lot going on in addition to the lift that is developing compliance to an API platform, FHIR v4. Tim will get into a little bit more of that. To sort of graphically represent, and you take a look at the deadlines between now and the end of the year, we have ONC certification testing available as stated between now and December 16th. We're really tearing up and targeting having our customer base largely complete that effort for certification by November 15th, just to give us an extra buffer. But you do have up to the December 16th. December 31st, as we all know, that's when our Chapel listings are updated. It's important to note the reason for the screaming red highlight is ONC enforcement is set to begin the beginning of 2023. So taking a hard look at your cures updates. As we all know, we've had the majority of the information in the final rule passed and the cures rule enacted as of July 2020. So ONC is ready to ensure that everything is compliant beginning in 2023. We're here to help. And we have a couple of tiered services positioned to help you meet the deadline for G10 at the end of the year. There is the standard pathway to do testing and certification for G10, and we would leverage and work with you during the proctored session using the Inferno test tool. The second and most newest option, and Tim's going to in a moment or two get into more detail about that, is performing the G10 testing and certification using the alternate test method with the AEGIS Touchstone test tool. Concurrent with either one of these test tools and pathways, I want to mention that we do have advisory services with Drummond. We're working with customers, sifting through a lot of the G10 implementation guides, questions around those, questions around information blocking, if then what's, if I was to code one way, how that will affect my certification. If you need more information from that, we have an opportunity to assist you in that way as well. So given that, at a high level, understanding the deadlines and what it means to be compliant between now and the end of the year, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Tim Bennett, and he's going to talk a little bit how AEGIS came about and give you some more details behind the Touchstone platform. So Tim, I'll hand it to you, and when you need advancement of the slides, do let me know.
All right, thanks, John. So with that all-important review of the ONC reg deadlines and enforcement sort of out of the way, the remainder of the webinar, we will focus on what John just talked about is, one new path at Drummond Group that we're offering to assist our customers or health IT developers to get G10 certified, and that's our new G10 FHIR API Plus program that's powered by Touchstone, which is now, as recent as June, an officially ONC approved test method for G10. So as an optional and alternative testing and certification program to G10, that's an alternate to using the Inferno test tool path. This new Drummond, testing certification program features access to the AEGIS Touchstone FHIR developer platform, designed to sort of aid developers in building ONC G10 compliant patient access and bulk data FHIR APIs. This Touchstone developer platform is ideal for integration into your organization's test-driven development strategy, where you code some, test some, code some more, test some more, basically testing and coding at the same time, so that as you are developing, implementing, you're testing that implementation, that what you're building the first time out is going to be compliant to the specs and the regs. And this was designed, the Touchstone platform was designed sort of from the ground up with developers in mind, not designed as sort of a certification testing tool, from the ground up. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Touchstone platform and our test scripts for G10, and showing you some of those features in a demo that will, that's aimed at speeding up your organization's consumption of understanding FHIR and gaining competency in it, and translating, that competency into a productive development of your FHIR implementation that's compliant out of the gate. So next slide. So why another test tool when Inferno is freely, openly available? It's a good test tool. Well, so for us, the answer goes back a few years ago when Drummond realized that patient access and bulk data were just the first FHIR use cases being pushed forward by ONC and CMS regs, and a more comprehensive FHIR testing certification strategy was needed for health IT developers in the marketplace. And so a strategic partnership between Drummond and AEGIS was formed to sort of meet this challenge head on. Both our organizations have a long history in testing and certification, and the Touchstone platform was already the leading comprehensive FHIR testing tool engaged in testing FHIR AEGIS across the spectrum. Next slide, please. And so with Drummond's emerging goal to build the industry's most comprehensive FHIR certification programs, it just really made tremendous sense for us to ally with AEGIS as Drummond's technology partner for now and for the future. And so our first cooperative venture with AEGIS together in testing and certification was in January 2021, when we launched our payer and patient access FHIR certification program. It was a certification program that the payer marketplace and solution providers in that space, to meet the CMS interoperability patient access final rule. That sort of similar to ONC's cures rule, made FHIR APIs as part of payer systems, giving access to their patient members to their to their health data and claims data and things like that. So that program that we launched in 2021, beginning of 2021, aimed in the payer space, while a lot of the FHIR AEGIS that we were testing in certification using, Touchstone, were more centric to the payer market, like provider directory, drug formulary, claims and counter data, things like that. There there was and is overlap between that final rule and the ONC's CURE's final rule in terms of FHIR API specs and IG, and those are namely US Core, the Smart on FHIR App Launch, OAuth, OpenID. And so as we built those scripts for that CMS testing program, for patient clinical data, bulk data we were offering for that program, Drummond parlayed those test scripts into a year-long review with ONC, very rigorous review with ONC, and an approval process to have those scripts approved by ONC and the Touchstone platform approved as an alternative test method to Inferno. Now, I just want to say that that was a lot of investment by Drummond, and hopefully that's a evidence to our customer base that Drummond has a commitment and a belief in this Touchstone platform as a a value-added tool in our customers' arsenal to help them become FHIR compliant, not just today, but in the future, and we'll kind of go into that in just a moment. But the main thing we wanted to do, if we were kind of promoting the Touchstone platform to integrate into your development, your QA processes, your test-driven development strategy, we also wanted that tool to be available to you to that same platform for official certification testing. As John mentioned, we at Drummond, we're going to offer two paths. You can get certified using the Inferno tool, or hopefully consider this new tool. But beyond the current ONC and CMS patient access FHIR regs, we are now with this partnership with AEGIS as our technology provider, we're positioned well for future FHIR regulatory and even sub-regulatory FHIR certification, when the market might self-adopt use cases and IGs for specific cases that aren't even in regs yet. So we have a very broad plan at Drummond Group to provide testing certification in the future, both as a result of ONC CMS regs, but also just as the market needs certification testing to help realize true interoperability in the marketplace. Next slide, please. So before we turn into the G10 compliance requirements and some more about Touchstone, the staring everyone here in the face for the end of the year, I'd like to just sort of elaborate a little bit on just a very brief picture of some of the other FHIR use cases, IGs, potential regs that are coming down the pike, just to sort of to emphasize that while G10 is something staring everyone in the face right now, there's certainly more FHIR coming, and the need for FHIR testing and certification. So we're all aware of the spotlight now being shown on social determinants of health, equitable healthcare, and I think certainly sharing of this kind of data between payers, providers, and across the care continuum is most likely going to be part of future rulemaking. And things like the Gravity Project is at the forefront of developing some of those FHIR implementation guides and data sets. And so we're looking at that, and we certainly think that that's part of the future landscape, and a very important one. Another really important one is this. The numbers I've seen is like $17 billion annual cost a year for our current prior authorization, solution. And certainly there's a lot of work being done at HL7 and with FHIR IGs to move prior authorization to FHIR-based technology, and both ONC and CMS have, invested RFIs and proposed rules around burden reduction around prior authorization FHIR-based. And so we know that that's coming. FHIR is part of the TEFCA rule as well. And CMS has signaled that they're moving to FHIR-based quality measure capture and reporting in the future as well. So couple that with, other things like, fire movement in the potentially in the public health spaces, and then exchanging data for clinical research and trials, payer data exchange, payer provider data exchange. There's lots of FHIR in the future, and we just feel like our customers, know that, realize that. G10 is something right in your face right now, but we think that you should consider, what's coming down the pike after that. And Drummond intends to, expand our fire testing services, into, a lot of these arenas. So just to, kind of signal our plans as well. That's why we're investing in technology and into our own certification programs. So next slide, John. So let me just sort of briefly outline some of what makes the Touchstone platform stand out before we give you guys you folks a chance to kind of see a live demo and see what we're talking about, for those of you who haven't had a chance to use the Touchstone platform yet. We've already mentioned that it's not just a testing tool. In fact, it's something, the G10 support in Touchstone is relatively new. It's been around for a while, the Touchstone platform. It's been part of, helping various HL7 fire accelerators develop implementation guides for a year, testing the implementation guides, the reference implementations that's built around it. It's been a staple at HL7 and CMS connectathons to help with testing at connectathons. And so as such, Touchstone already has a wide support for many versions of FHIR, implementation guides, various different use cases, ready to run test scripts and conformance suites right out of the box. And Touchstone was initially, as I mentioned before, sort of built as a FHIR developers testing platform, to integrate really with a true test-driven development strategy. Its design links your test results directly back into the FHIR IG so that your FHIR competency is accelerated, within an organization's dev team. And in a sense, sort of as opposed to, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way about Inferno, but Inferno was originally built, as a testing tool. But Touchstone was sort of out of the box designed as, as this dev platform. And Drummond kind of, in a sense, has, we've kind of co-opted, this platform to use it for, testing and certification. And, we certainly feel like this marriage, has great value to our customers. Some of the things that really stand out there is that, Touchstone has a, built into it, user accounts, organization accounts, full history of your test executions. And so, those kinds of, features help organizations really see how they're, share their testing results internally and share them, and be able to see, how their test results change over time. Now, another thing is that the test scripts in Touchstone are built using FHIR's own test script resource. You don't need another language or necessarily to write the test scripts. It's using FHIR to test FHIR, which was sort of originally planned in the development of the FHIR core. And this allows a more straightforward and standardized approach to test script development, and sort of opens up the world to test script authoring to end users of Touchstone, and not just to what we would say the AEGIS staff or the the developers of the platform itself. In fact, organizations across the world are writing their own test scripts in addition to the ready to run out of the box scripts. And we can see a promise of this to be a very powerful asset in maybe using the platform for real world testing, diagnosing client issues, prototyping, many other ways where if an organization can sort of write their own FHIR testing scripts. So next slide, please. Now it's time for the demo. I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, James Threet. He is Drummond's Test Lab Director, and he's going to demo the Touchstone tool so you guys can get a quick glimpse of what we've been sharing and talking about. James?
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everybody. As Tim said, my name is James Threet, and I am the Drummond Group Healthcare Compliance Services Test Lab Director. I come to this role by way of working in the EHR industry for many years. Immediately prior to working at Drummond Group, I was a product manager at an EHR company, and we did certification back in 2018. And so being somebody that has both tested and certified their own build of G7, 8, and 9, as well as tested and certified other products on G7, 8, and 9, I can tell you from my perspective, the Touchstone tool is something that I wish that I had had access to all the way back then. So, and I think that's what you'll see here, why Drummond Group was so interested in doing this. And let me just show you some of the value here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and log in. You'll see here that there's a register button. So there is a free lane account on Touchstone. You may not have access to the G10 test scripts because those are behind a special license that Drummond is working with AEGIS on. But let me just show you what the tool will look like. And I'll give you a brief example of what some of these results will look like. You can see all the different test scripts and test suites that Touchstone supports, all the DaVinci, the claims and encounters, provider directory, drug formulary, all these different FHIR AIGs are all supported by Touchstone. Touchstone is also a very heavily involved in all of the different connectathons. So these IGs were developed while testing them with Touchstone. And so Touchstone is a very well integrated to the FHIR overall IGs. So I'm going to run the public server conformance suite. And a few things to notice right off the bat here. You will see these circles, and those circles are kind of a visual representation of how well your system has done in the test. So you can see that there's a 71% conformant. There's also these circles, which actually will help you drill down into what your issues actually are. So the green segments are tests that were passed, no warnings. The yellow segments are tests that passed, but with warnings. And I'll show you an example of that here in a moment. And then the red segments are tests that were failed. So in addition to that, there's also these tables with pass and fail and different stats. So you can really get a sense of how well you're doing. There's also a history feature, which will show you your past results and up until the present day. So that's another benefit of Touchstone, is it remembers what you passed and what you needed to work on some more. So for this demonstration, I am going to force some errors. And the reason for that is, as part of establishing equivalency with Inferno, we applied with the Touchstone test tool using the Inferno reference server. So those of you already familiar with Inferno and running Inferno against its own demo server, those screens in the Inferno reference server will look very familiar. And Touchstone will give basically the same result as Inferno. You'll see some differences, but the Inferno reference server is going to pass G10 testing. So I'm going to force an issue so that you can see what that looks like by running the confidential client against a public client test suite. So I'm going to select these two, and just to give you a clue about what this will look like. All right, so it's running. All right, and so this is the OAuth 2 launch screen. You'll see all the requested scopes and some of the other details here, URL, and so on. So we'll just click continue. All right, and then for those of you familiar with Inferno, this should look very familiar. So I'm just going to select this patient and authorize everything. All right, so we have our results down here. You can see the date and time stamp. So for means of comparison, let me just show you this revoke token test we didn't run, but because of the necessary additional steps. But you can see what pass looks like without warnings. And so, there's nothing to dive into there. There's also a pass with a W. I hope it's big enough that you all can see it. But there is a pass with W, and we can expand these and just take a look at what those are. So these are the warnings: registration endpoint, management endpoint, introspection endpoint. And so you can see right here in the name of the test, it's recommended, 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 recommended. However, these are best practices. So Touchstone is not just looking at what will pass the test, but also what are the best practices behind it so that you can really get your FHIR server up to snuff. Going back, let's look at these fails. All right, so scrolling down, obviously we failed the public launch because we used the confidential client. And what you'll see is the error messages. So on the OAuth 2 get token operation, the test tool received a 401 unauthorized instead of a 200 or 201. And so we know that that was going to happen. We expected it in this case, but I think it gives you a good idea of what things Touchstone is looking for, because this first operation that failed will have a cascading error. So you'll see all the different things that are tested as part of this get token operation. So there's both warnings and errors. But what is really great about Touchstone is that you can look at your responses and see what was the issue. See, we say a 401 is what was returned. We can see what the request body was. And we can also dive into the definitions and the description and all the other details that are going to be shown here to help you diagnose and correct whatever the issue is. So something that Touchstone supports, which you may find useful, is also that Touchstone allows you to select different tests. You don't have to select all of them like an Inferno, but you can, if you're working on observation, vital sign, blood pressure, and you want to know and get feedback on if you're doing that correctly, you can come into Touchstone and run just that test and get it instant feedback. Whereas the other tool, so Inferno was developed around certifying G10. So that's really where its focus is. And it works great for that. I see that there's some questions in the Q&A about, is this going to continue to be supported? We are going to support that. That is a perfectly valid test tool, and it will be probably useful for, many developers that certify G10 this year. For developers that are building their own FHIR server, we feel Touchstone will offer a compelling value proposition that you'll get feedback and results that will be worth way more than what the subscription price is. And John will talk more about what that subscription is, but you should know that it is a special subscription, and it may have lower pricing than you'll see on the Touchstone subscription page. But we feel it's great value. I feel it's great value. I've worked with this now I actually was involved with the application to ONC. And so I've been working with this coming up on, 2 years or more. But I still fully believe that this is very important and very useful for developers building their own solution. So with that, let me also just mention that if you go into the organizations and the test systems, you'll see many organizations from our industry that use this test tool and have memberships and subscriptions. And so, this is very widely used in the industry at all the connectathons, for all the IGs. So I think you'll really see a lot of benefit here. I mentioned that there is a history feature, so you can see all of your past test results. and it is possible to publish your results summary so that your test lab, or if you have a client that wants to see the results, you can publish that for them without giving them an account on Touchstone, which is really nice as well. So I believe I've covered everything, and let me pass it on back to Tim and John.
Yeah, I'm just going to wrap up here. Thanks a lot, James, for that all too brief demo of Touchstone. Drummond is certainly happy to follow up with, anyone who's interested in seeing more, have a more thorough demonstration of Touchstone, and, talk about our alternative test method. At the end of the presentation, we'll, sort of tell you how, you can contact us, and we'll definitely follow up with you. So, sort of lastly here from my part, before turning it back to my colleague John for wrap up, I just want to highlight the specific G10 FHIR IG and specifications that are referenced in the CURE's final rule, and make it clear that Touchstone and Drummond's G10 FHIR API Plus program, our alternate test method, supports, testing and certification to each of these specifications. There was a question in the Q&A, if you have a G8 implementation that you've had certified, what's the differences between that and G10? And so let me just briefly touch on that here, because I know we have time. So when ONC came out with the 2015 edition program in 2016, that's when they introduced, required API support in AEHR. So APIs requires, as you guys know, if you're a certified EHR developer, health IT developer, that you've had ONC's required APIs for now many years. But when they introduced it in the 2015 edition, FHIR was still, that was before FHIR R4. It was kind of still immature from a certification standpoint, like that widespread. And so ONC allowed developers to sort of roll their own with their API. So you could have a proprietary API, you just had to publish, how external folks could access your API with the documentation and stuff. So the real changes when the CURE's final rule was introduced in 2020 was, and this is what G10 is, and this is the primary shift from G8 to G10, is that your FHIR APIs now with G10 have to be on, FHIR R4 version. So they have to be FHIR R4 implementation guide, or FHIR R4 core spec. You have to support the US Core 311 IG and US CDI version 1 for the patient clinical data set. You have to support Smart on FHIR version 100, not 100, app launch framework. That includes OAuth 2, OpenID Connect, for all of the client registration and authorization, patient authentication, that sort of thing. And then you also have to support the FHIR bulk data access version 100 IG as well. So in the CURE's rule, the big change between G8 and G10 was standardizing these specs and these IGs for your FHIR APIs, as opposed to sort of a, sort of roll your own thing. So hopefully that helps clear up, what the transition from G8 to G10 requirement is from ONC. And finally, I'll just say here, ONC has just recently approved, upgraded versions of these specs as part of their, standardized, version, process, so that, implementers can choose to use updated versions of these specs and get certified to them as well. And that includes US Core 4 and 5. That includes Smart on FHIR 2.0 instead of 1.0, and the bulk data 2.0 IG as well. And so they have just approved those implementations, and we at Drummond and with the AEGIS team for Touchstone support, we have a timeline to include testing and certification of these newer versions of the spec versions too. So that way our clients can decide how they want to move forward with certification. So finally, just the very heart and premise of Drummond's approach to fire testing. We want to be that comprehensive, robust, scalable fire testing certification service. It's going to be living. It's going to be expanding over time. It's going to, just like we started out with the CMS patient access testing, and now expanding here into G10 testing, and we know that our repertoire of testing and certification across different use cases and IGs is going to grow over time. So with that in mind, John, I'm going to kind of turn it back over to you, and you can kind of take us home for the rest of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim and James. So as mentioned, let's lay out for our ATS customer base here the runways towards G10 certification in terms of our program levels. So the first one is what we'll call the Inferno level. So as you would expect, it's the G10 testing and certification pathway. We will, and answering again one of the Q&As earlier, backing up Tim's answer, is we will obviously leverage the publicly available Inferno test tool. As long as that's available for G10 testing per ONC rules and regulations, that'll be one pathway for our customer base. As you would expect, with a proctored test and lead up to that, our industry-leading Drummond support staff will be with you every step of the way. And this would align with your current statement of work and pricing guidelines as a current Drummond customer. The next thing is looking at the new alt test method approach using Inferno's Drummond G10 FHIR API plus level program. Specific to G10 testing and certification, that would be the test suite. That would be when you get into Touchstone, what you have access to as James demonstrated, to build code, test against specific, even portions of the test script, all of that built into using the alt test method. It's access to the Touchstone FHIR platform. You would get that access for a full year, and there's an annual license renewal option along with that after that year. As you would expect, again, access to the Drummond support staff. James, as mentioned, others here at Drummond are versed as well on offering the G10 compliance certification testing, leveraging the test tool here with Touchstone, and you also get AEGIS support with that as well. And be given, if anybody that is familiar with AEGIS, there's, as Tim mentioned, there's a breadth of fire testing available with that. You would start here with this program to achieve G10, but it offers you a gateway to a lot of other fire testing and implementation programs to leverage Touchstone as your platform to do that. But we've worked with AEGIS to say Drummond customers would have a reduced license fee available to them, depending on the amount of platforms and products for certification as a result of being Drummond customers. So any standard licensing that you might be familiar with AEGIS up to this point, we have a nominal reduced fee for customers to leverage the tools and test suites that James was able to show a little bit earlier. Just to sum it up, team, if you had to put them side by side at the highest level, when you look at the Drummond alt test method featuring Touchstone versus Inferno, as you would expect, again, in summary, full-fledged conformance to ONC's G10 requirements. Test results reporting is available. You do get extra, as James demonstrated, precision error and warning indicators, the ability to drill down and really look at the minutiae in terms of where you have to code to correct any warnings or correct any errors. It is available for both concurrent testing of user and organization accounts. It nicely fits into any agile test-driven development environment. Important too is there's no other languages or platforms to leverage. We are using HL7 FHIR's test script resource. That's a huge time saver when you think about coding your platform and compliance activities. It has the opportunity that it's a gateway to support additional FHIR use case and certification. as you would expect for either platform for G10 certification, having access to Drummond support. So all of the other things that we're able to discuss and demonstrate. Your easy test choices, the ability to publish information for apps about what your test results are. Nice, neat quality control, quality assurance reporting is available from the Touchstone platform as well. I can show you that in a more customer-centric detail if you would like. So next steps, team, just to wrap this up, is if you're interested, we want to hear from you. Please contact us directly using the email address that you see there, FHIR@drummondgroup.com. We can work with you to schedule a demo specific to your environment. James can answer some additional questions, go through some additional test suites. Then there's a completion of an enrollment process. We would work with you and have AEGIS assist you as well, onboarding to the Touchstone platform. And then you have the freedom to develop and test incrementally, compile your test results for eventual submission to the Drummond certification body. So what we're going to do now, team, is we're just going to have a quick pause. We do have about 4 or 5 minutes left in the presentation time. We'll leverage and scroll through the Q&A to see if there's any questions we might be able to answer on the fly. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this was recorded. So the recording will be made available and the deck itself will be made available to customers through the traditional pathways through the website and the customer service portals. So we do thank you for your time and attendance. If you would like to stay on for the next few minutes, we'll go through a couple of Q&As right now between myself, James, and Tim. So we'll take a quick look like those.
So John, there's a question that I'd like to follow up on. And so the question from one of the attendees is, if an enterprise FHIR server becomes G10 certified, would any other vendor who leverages the FHIR server into their overall solution become G10 certified by default, or would they need to pursue their own G10 compliance independently via their own solution? So the answer is kind of both, and it kind of depends on the integrator of this certified FHIR server. That integrator is certainly allowed by ONC to assume that FHIR server's own certification and not have to recertify it. But they may choose to do so on their own. So if they are interested in having, that G10 listing on their own chapel listing with ONC, they don't have to. They could just basically tell their provider clients that when you go do your CMS attestations, that you pick their own their product, their EHR, but also the FHIR server's certified product that's on the listing, and together those two solutions would satisfy CMS's requirements for the provider to be using certified technology that includes G10. But oftentimes, as maybe a business or a marketing decision, an integrator of a fully certified third-party service like that, they may choose to recertify it, if you will, as part of their integrated product, so that they can can't claim compliance for it on their own chapel listing. So either way works.
Can I just add something there?
Yeah, go ahead.
That? So for vendors that choose not to live test G10 on their own and instead choose to leverage the existing certification of their third-party FHIR server vendor, one thing to note is that if the EHR developer had previously certified G7, 8, and 9, they would still have to maintain certification for G7 and update G9 to G9 cures. And so one thing to check is, if you decide to leverage an outside G10 server, make sure to pay attention to what you're going to do with your G7 and G9 solutions from years ago. because you'll have to maintain those in addition to your G10 interface, unless that third party has a different solution for you.
Let's see. Looks like there might be. Do we have John? Do we have time for one more question here?
Yes, sir, we do.
For a developer who is new to FHIR, adopts Touchstone, how long would it take for them to develop a system of their own? A rough estimate on average. Wow, that's I don't know, John and James. I mean, that's really going to vary by you know, by organization, how much resources you have, and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
I don't know. Do you guys want to take a stab at that, or?
Likewise, Tim, it really is customer readiness. The beauty is with this alt test method through Touchstone, a lot of the scripts are all prepared. You get the test script FHIR resource. So it depends on the familiarity with the requirements, the percentage completion understanding and resources that are available for coding the implementation guides, as well as writing for the SVAP process. So we're in the process now. Obviously, James can speak more to this as we're queuing up customers for G10 certification, some of them on this platform already, but it's tough to say depending on without understanding your customer readiness. And again, maybe here's an opportunity as well that if you're starting at square one, you're not quite out of time. We may be able to assist you even further with deeper dives into understanding the implementation guides, path of least resistance, whether that is Inferno or the Touchstone test tool with advisory services as well. But tough to answer that question without understanding the nuances of your current EHR readiness.
Yeah, so let me try to get to a couple other questions here as we're only got 5 minutes or so left. How to test our system endpoint? Just need to mention endpoint in base URL and provide OAuth 2 well-known configuration for token. One of the things that we didn't really have time in our demo to really get into, but you know, one of the features I think that's really smart about Touchstone is in the tool you can define as many sort of test systems as you want. These are sort of logical test systems, and yes, your you know, your endpoint is part of you know, the data fields that you enter when you set up a test system in Touchstone. But there's some other options in there too. You know, if you know, with your OAuth support and you know, a number of other configurations. So you set it up and configure that, and of course, you know, Touchstone remembers that. You may, you know, we've had customers that would set up a test system for testing confidential clients, another for testing public clients. You know, you may have a separate server endpoint for bulk data, so you could set up, you know, multiple test systems and you know, and have those configured and rated tests. You don't have to kind of switch around and change things. So there's a really robust test system set up in Touchstone that really, I think, aids with that. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
At this point, we'll allow customers to transition to your next responsibility at the top of the hour. We do, again, appreciate everyone attending. The recording and this deck will be made available to all attendees, as well as one last look here, team. Please leverage FHIR at drummondgroup.com for any other types of follow-up. We do appreciate your time and attendance and wish you a great rest of the week.